Mordar reviving multiple minions from a single tombstone? I'm bad as a fish, and this is a Minion Masters Master Update video. So in the latest Minion Masters patch, version 1.45, there were some considerable changes to Mordar. So we're going to have a look at those and how they compare to how it was before. So Mordar, of course, is the master that will have the tombstones, and the tombstones will revive minions. Now, what happened previously was that the tombstone would revive. If it revived a minion, then the tombstone would be destroyed, and the minion would revive with HP based on how long the tombstone had been charging for. But things have been changed a little bit. So one thing to note is Mordar's basic attack hasn't changed, so his AoE arena-wide on his side of the field has not changed at all. So the tombstone has changed from a cycle-based perk, one that's added as a card to your deck, to a timer-based perk, and this is something we've seen previously with Diona and with Apep, for example. So that means that it doesn't restrict being a timer-based perk your deck building choices, in so much as it doesn't matter if you've got a cheap deck or an expensive deck. Those two would affect how often you get the card. If it's cycle-based, an expensive deck will take a long time to get through to your tombstone, whereas now it's timer-based, it doesn't matter. But of course, whether you've got a cheap deck or an expensive deck, that dictates the value of the units that you can revive from the tombstones. So he gets his tombstone every 30 seconds. Now, one thing to note again is that the tombstone is the timer starts once the previous tombstone dies. So unlike the Apep timers, for example, Apep's perk 3 timer for a free single-use 4-mana card, for example, that will start from the moment you play the last card, whereas this tombstone timer will start not when you play the tombstone, but when the tombstone is destroyed. So, as before, this tombstone will revive the next minion that dies. Remember, it's going to take 10 seconds to charge up. Once it's charged, it's available to revive. Now, what will happen is the minion will revive, and it may, or crucially, may not destroy the tombstone. And if it doesn't destroy the tombstone will again then recharge another 10 seconds, and once it's recharged, it will be available to revive another minion. So the real key point here is that a tombstone can potentially revive multiple minions, something that we couldn't do previously with Mordar. Now, there's some things to consider with regards to these revives and how the tombstone may or may not survive. And the game doesn't do a particularly good job at explaining exactly how it works, I don't think. So let me try it for you. Okay, so a tombstone will start with 500 health, and it will take 10 seconds to charge. A tombstone, like any other building in Minion Masters, has its decay damage. So after 50 seconds, which is its total duration, it will have decayed to nothing. So that has to be taken into account. So what happens is, once it's charged, if a minion revives, there is some maths that are done behind the scenes. So what happens is, when the minion dies, that minion will do, when it dies and revives, I should say, that minion will do damage to the tombstone. And the damage is half of that minion's maximum HP. So I think when we looked at the patch notes, we did some examples there. So for example, if you've got a warrior with 350 health, if that dies and then is revived, that will do half of that 350, so 175 damage to the tombstone. Now, if that tombstone has got enough HP to survive that, then it will start to recharge, and the warrior will revive with twice the damage, which is 175 times 2, so back to 350. So the warrior will revive at full HP. So it's a little bit confusing to follow, but if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. Basically, what it's saying is, if the tombstone has enough health to survive, then the minion will revive with full HP. And remember, the health is half of the damage, half of the max HP that the minion has. So as long as the tombstone's got enough health to survive, the minion will spawn at full HP, and the tombstone will recharge. So there's basically two things that happen. Either the tombstone survives, the minion spawns with full HP, and it recharges, or the Tombstone is destroyed, and the minion that revives will have partial HP. And the HP it gets is twice the amount of damage that it did to the Tombstone. So for example, if you have a Colossus which has got a lot of HP, and a Tombstone with, for example, let's say 300 health. So the Colossus, when it dies, will do half its max HP, 500 damage to the Tombstone. The Tombstone's only got 300 health, so the event will destroy the Tombstone with 300 damage, and then the Colossus will revive. It will have done that 300 damage to the Tombstone, so its health is 300 times 2, so it's 600. It's a partial res. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. It's kind of a little confusing, but if you just think about the way the maths works, it kind of makes sense. So at perk 1, you can't revive these huge minions with full HP, but you can revive smaller minions, and crucially, you can get multiple revives. So that needs to be considered when you're thinking about what you want in your deck. Now, you know, there's a lot of minions that can revive, and they don't really care about HP. A sniper doesn't really matter if it doesn't have much HP. A wizard puff still get value even if it doesn't have much HP. A tranquil Shihao, for example, will heal regardless. So depending on the state of the Tombstone, the resurrections you get can be more or less valuable. Now perk 2 is the same, where the minion that's reviving gets haste and spirit. Now, crucially, the spirit is taken into account with the calculations of how much HP it has, how much damage it does to the Tombstone. So minions reviving with spirit will do more damage to the Tombstone. And perk 3, Sepulchre, I think that's how we pronounce it. So instead of how we had previously, where you would get a second Tombstone, now you get one massive Tombstone. So the health goes up from 500 to 1500. Now remember, effectively, what the health of the Tombstone is controlling how much units are going to revive with it in terms of HP, and how many things you can revive from it. So for example, if we've got a huge Tombstone like this, you can revive huge minions with full HP. Now, this definitely changes the way that Mordar decks can work, because you're not building it all around something where you just want this one massive res and everything else is irrelevant. So you're looking to have multiple things that can be revived, some things that really don't worry about how much HP they've got. So this is an interesting change. Is it too strong? Is it too weak? These are the questions that really will be answered over the case of the whole season. We see how things work out, see what decks are kind of very strong. But I do like the fact that the timer-based perk means that it's easier to balance it, because that's another knob to turn, and it doesn't restrict you with regards to your deck building. Okay, so hopefully that was a reasonable explanation of how the new Mordar works. It's a little bit confusing, but if you sit back and just think about it for a little bit, it kind of starts to make sense. Now, I've tried Mordar out, and I do like the way it plays, for sure. And one thing to note, of course, is that the stunning interaction has changed with the Tombstone. So back in the day, if you stunned it, it would reset it and it'd have to recharge. Then it was changed, whereas stun would only prevent the res whilst the stun was active, and then it would go back to its previously charged state. Now we're back to being able to stun it and again reset it. So it's a lot more easy now to prevent resurrections with any sort of stun interaction that you've got. So hopefully you guys have had a chance to try out the new Mordar. I'll be very interested to see what you think about it. Let me know in the comments. I've been enjoying it. Haven't played it too much. Trying to get some Mordar sniper action. That's one of my favourite decks. Some people really hate that deck, but I really enjoy that. So maybe we'll get a video about that soon. But yeah, let me know. And yeah, of course, if you're enjoying the content, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I'm Bad as a Fish, and as always, this is an Awkward Wave.